Okay, well, today's discussion is a continuation of the biology of genetics, and we're going to focus specifically on sex determination. And so we want to ask the question, will a child be a girl or a boy? And what is the genetic pattern that determines the sex of the child? And so basically we are going to be looking at sex determining chromosomes. And distinguishing what is the allele pair or the chromosome set that determines whether a child will be a girl or a boy. So it'd be interesting to look at things other than humans as well, and it actually turns out that the pattern of sex determination is variable depending on the species. So for instance, if you are a human female, we say that you have XX chromosomes, and if you are a human male, we say that you have XY chromosomes. And if we look at this pattern of inheritance, it turns out that females contribute an X to all of their offspring in their gametes, whereas males, 50% of their gametes contribute an X, and 50% of their gametes contribute a Y. And so we say that in humans, it is the male who actually determines the sex of the child. And this kind of has an interesting historical reference, because you might be familiar with King Henry VIII, who was famous for beheading his wives because they failed to bear a son to him. But the reality is that King Henry VIII might have been better off beheading himself, because he's the one who determines the sex of the children. Now, in contrast, if you were a bird, hens are ZW, and so we say that the fact that the sex-determining chromosomes are different, we describe this as being heterogamous. They have a Z and a W chromosome, whereas the males, the roosters, in this case, are ZZ or homogamous. And so sex determination in birds is exactly opposite to sex determination in mammals, in that it is the female who determines the sex of the chicks. If you were a fruit fly, well, you got a weird system going on when you're a fruit fly. Much like human females, female fruit flies are XX, but male fruit flies, they can be XY or just X. That is, they don't have a second chromosome, a chromosome pair, and so sometimes we describe that as being X0, 0 referring to no chromosome. And because of that, we say that the males, because they either have a Y or they have no chromosome, we say that the males determine the sex in flies. And then if you were a grasshopper, well, much like the fruit flies, the females are XX, the males are X or XO, and once again, we could say that the males are determining the sex of the nymphs, the baby grasshoppers. So there is not one set rule, and I think that's an important thing to recognize. Now, sex chromosomes are produced, or sex determination and the inheritance of traits occurs as a result of gametes that fuse together. So recall, gametes are the sperm and the eggs, and we describe the gametes as having N chromosomes each. That is, N is haploid, which refers to 1/2 the chromosome set. And so when N sperm fuses with N egg, we produce a 2N cell. That 2N cell is diploid. And that is a full chromosome set. That is, every chromosome is paired. And then mitosis will occur to produce the baby. And mitosis will allow that baby to grow up and produce its own gametes. And when it produces its own gametes, it does that by meiosis. And its sex determines the type of gametes that it produces. So when we look at meiosis and what meiosis is, I just have a couple quick statements for you. We can say that meiosis is a specialized type of cell division. It is occurring only in the reproductive organs, and we call those reproductive organs gonads. Plants have reproductive organs as well. We call those the ovum and the anthers, and those reproductive organs produce haploid gametes, pollen and ovules. And the key thing is that these reproductive organs produce haploid cells, and in producing haploid cells and allowing for sexual reproduction, we increase genetic diversity. And this is a really important part of our understanding of genetics and meiosis. Sex increases genetic diversity because it mixes the genes of two individuals. So I thought I'd look at what happens during meiosis in a male. And if we look at this series of cells, we're going to start with our initial cell. And this initial cell might be in the testes. And it's going to undergo meiosis. And the very first thing that's going to happen is the chromosomes will duplicate in S. So DNA replication will occur, and that's why we now see the pairing of the big A's and the pairing of the little a's. I want you to notice and pay particular attention to these chromosomes. These are our sex-determining chromosomes. Where this one, this little guy, is the Y, and this big orange one is the X. And we're now going to undergo what we call meiosis 1. And what meiosis 1 does is it separates the chromosome pairs, the homologous pairs of chromosomes. And I put alleles on the other chromosomes, the red and blue ones, so that you can see what's going on if we were to be tracking a trait as well. And then we're going to go through meiosis 2. And what meiosis 2 does is it separates the chromatids. I want you to notice a few things. We went from a cell that is 2n equals 4, 2n equals 4, and then after meiosis 1, these cells are n equals 2, but each chromosome is paired. And then finally we end up with 4 cells where n equals 2. And I'd like to point out that it is equally possible that we could have had a big A cell with an X chromosome or a big A cell with a Y chromosome, or big A allele with a Y chromosome. And I think what's interesting here is I want you to note that all 4 of these gametes are different in that we have a little a allele with an X chromosome, sorry. We have a little a allele with a Y chromosome, a big A with a Y, and a big A with a little, and this gets back to the point of creating genetic diversity. Well, getting back to our sex determination piece, each of these things would develop into a sperm. And so what we can see is that 50% of the male's gametes are going to contribute the Y chromosome, and 50% of the gametes are going to contribute the X chromosome. When we look at a human karyotype, we can actually see the distinction between the X and the Y chromosomes. Notice in this karyotype here, chromosomes 1 through 22 are all paired pretty evenly, and then we get this set here where we have a big X and a little Y. In our second karyotype, again, chromosomes 1 through 22 are paired, and then that last one is paired as well. So this is our X and our X. So now we can take this to the point of a genetic problem, and that is the case of a man and a woman. They're going to have a baby. Whoops, not a wormin, a woman. That would be really weird to have a wormin. A man and a woman are going to have a baby, and the question is, what is the chance of having a girl? Well, this type of genetic problem is about as easy as it gets. The man is XY, the woman is XX. So what we'll do is we'll use Mendel's law of segregation. What the law of segregation does is it basically says the allele pair separate during gamete development. So that means that if it were the male up top here, the sperm would hold an X, 50% of them would hold an X, 50% of them would hold a Y. In the case of the woman, she only has X chromosomes in her eggs. And so now if we fill in our Punnett square, we can see that there is a 50% chance of having a girl, and a 50% chance of having a boy. So this leads us to just an interesting way that we can solve some genetic problems relating to sex inheritance. And we've already answered the first question if we were to be looking at this couple here who already have a son. And it looks like his mother is pregnant again, and we don't know what's the chance that their child is a boy. And we just solved that problem. It's 50% because she is XX and he is XY. But we could now ask the question in terms of probability, and that is if they were to have a third child. So let's say they had a son. Whoa! Congratulations! Woohoo! You had a son. And now they're going to have another baby and she's pregnant again. What's the chance that baby will be a boy? Well, it actually turns out that the chance is 50% because every time you have a child, we have to build a brand new Punnett square and say, well, this is the probability. It's sort of like flipping a coin. If you flip a coin and you get a heads and you then grab that coin and you ask yourself, what's the chance of getting a heads? It's still 50%. And even if you got 10 heads in a row, if your coin was not a weighted coin, when you start over again, what's the chance of getting a heads? Well, probability begins with the moment you flip the coin, and there's a 50% chance. Well, the same thing's true with having children. Every time you have a child, there's a 50% chance of having a girl and a 50% chance of having a boy. But we could phrase the question in a different way. We could say, hey, you're going to have kids. What is the chance that you will have 3 girls over the course of your childbearing years? What is the chance of that? Well, what we are basically saying is, what is the chance of having a girl and having a girl and having a girl? And when we do that, we think in terms of probability. What is the chance of having a girl? Well, it is 50%. And, well, whenever we use the word and, we're really saying multiply. And having a girl and having a girl. So there is a 1/8 chance of a couple who has only 3 kids having 3 girls. Well, that's it. That's our discussion on sex determination. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk more about this and other genetics problems tomorrow. Cheers.